Can you hear me?
Yeah, broadcasting, Alex. Okay. Right, well, we will start then. It's just coming up to 10 o'clock. So, Mr. Powell, good morning. Welcome to everybody. Welcome to everybody in the room. Welcome to those people joining us remotely. And also welcome to any members of the public watching this live screening or indeed watching the video recording at some future date. Warm welcome, everybody. Welcome particularly to Angela down in the corner there. Welcome, Angela. It's nice, good to see you. Warm welcome. We have one apology today, and that is Hannah, who's unable to join us.
Damon as well.
Oh, and Damon, sorry, yes, indeed, yes. Two apologies today, Damon and Hannah. We are quorate. Just a reminder that this meeting is being recorded. Microphones are quite sensitive. It's being live streamed as we speak. And as always, for the benefit of anybody joining us for the first time, just to sort of an outline, this is the Trust Board meeting. It's the end of the governance process. The hard work of governance is done in our committees. The purpose of the board meeting is not to repeat the work of the committees, but it is to ensure that committee work has been done, and we give opportunities for the chairs of those committees at various points through this meeting to feedback on their committee work. That said, let's move on to the first item, which is item 2, declarations of interest. Anybody got any declarations relating to the agenda items? I think so. That's good. Item 3 for approval, the minutes of the past meeting on the 29th of November. Any questions or comments on those minutes, Trish?
We just omitted the apology of Angela from the last meeting, so we'll just add that.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much. And there were, in terms of item 4, the action log, there are no open items. So if everyone's content, we can take that matter as read. So we come to item 5, which is my report and also the report of the Vice Chair. The papers are in the pack. I'm sure everybody's read it. I'm going to take that as read. I don't have anything other to add to my report other than one item, which I'll just do, and then I'll ask Kerry if she wants to make any comment on that. Well, actually, two things, actually. The first is very much to thank my NED colleagues for the time they took out to go out and visit a wide range of locations in the early part of this month. After the New Year, the Christmas and New Year period was particularly difficult in terms of volumes, very stressful, of course, for our crews. And so I know that I and all our colleagues, NED colleagues, took time out in the beginning of January to go and visit crews. I was in North Wales, people were in the Middle and South Wales. I think we did a lot of visits spread over a week. So my thanks to my colleagues who did that. And the other thing I just wanted to mention is I'm going to ask Liam just to say a brief word. There has been an announcement at Cardiff University in relation to some of the training which they are planning on stopping, which is probably rather unhelpful. So Liam, did you want to say a few words about that while we have the opportunity?
Yeah, do that now. So trust colleagues, all colleagues will probably be aware that there was an announcement yesterday by Cardiff University that they are consulting on withdrawing of the nurse education programmes pre and post-reg. So that for us as a trust is particularly disappointing. We're looking to expand our multi-professional workforce. We've been doing a lot of work in that space. So yeah, we're quite concerned about the announcement. So just for Trust Board colleagues' awareness, I can confirm that we executive nurses met this morning and with the Chief Nursing Officer and also with the Exec Nurse for Health Education and Improvement Wales to seek further clarification. Obviously, we don't have certainty over anything at the moment, but we are particularly concerned to ensure support to nurse educators who are directly affected and to ensure the future nursing workforce for Wales are supported through even 13 times. I think from a Trust Board perspective, we would bring updates back to the Culture Committee.
Okay, thanks, Liam. We'll wait for further news on that.
Yeah, just a quick, I just want to press. Remind me, where else in Wales is that taught? In terms of the university sector, Liam? I mean, were it to close, what would be the potential alternative provision?
So there is alternative university provision, and as a result of the decision we are making, we're considering what other options are available to us within Wales.
Okay.
So University of South Wales would be the closest to Cardiff. It's a large nursing school. Swansea, I think, does it as well, doesn't it?
Good.
I'm not sure in the north, maybe
No.
Realms.
Bangor?
That's reassuring to hear that, you know, potentially there are things.
Yeah, so, and the alternatives go to order.
Yeah.
I think that's what I was
Yeah,
seeing.
sure.
So there's what we have through the university sector, there's the state health boards have university organisations, and there's the work that we do with the FE, further education state area as well. So there's a lot of work to understand where future provision might come from. But I think in the first instance, it's about us working inside Cardiff University and understanding their position and the conversation that they are going through.
Thank you.
Good, thanks, Liam. Kerry, was there anything you wanted to add?
No,
No.
nothing from me.
It's all in the papers. Any questions to Kerry or I? Good. Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on then to item 6, which is the Chief Exec's report. So Jason, over to you.
Great, thank you, Colin. So as usual, I'll just pull out a couple of kind of salient points or key items from the paper, and then happy to take any questions on it. Can I start on the top of page 4? And the paragraph 2 and 3 just draw the board's attention to the information there about the mental health response vehicle. We've discussed this a couple of times before when the board's met, and I think we covered it in my last report. What we can see here in paragraph 3 is now some emerging data on the effectiveness of this mental health response vehicle, which is operating across the southeast. You'll see that through the early days, and this data is through to mid-January, so a couple of weeks ago, roughly 40% of those patients that the MHRV attends are managed to be treated safely with their episode of care closed on scene. So early days, but certainly encouraging signs coming through from that dedicated vehicle. Bottom of page 4, paragraph 5 just references the critical incident that was declared on the 30th of December. Colleagues will have seen that widely reported in the media, pretty much on every broadcast and national UK national print the following day. Essentially, that arose because of significant pressure in the system around us. We saw a large number of emergency calls being held and extensive delays at emergency departments across Wales, therefore inhibiting our ability to respond in a timely fashion to patients across communities with some very long delays in our communities. So, of course, we escalated within our contingency plan, so REAP, and also declared a critical incident, seeking support from colleagues across the system. There's not really much more to say on it at this point. There has been an assessment of avoidable harm, which could have occurred through that period of extreme pressure, and of course, much of that will continue to trickle through in the coming weeks as reports, concerns, and potentially inquests get listed for those affected by the extreme delays we saw. I think, Colin, the only thing I just want to say at the moment, and you touched on this in your report, is just to say thank you to everyone that was involved in responding across a couple of days of significant, very significant pressure, probably the most significant we've seen as an organisation. And it would have been very difficult for colleagues, particularly in contact centres, but also those delayed at emergency departments. And I just want to pay tribute to them and thank them for everything they did, because I recognise, we recognise, and I certainly recognise it would have been a very difficult couple of days for people. So thank you to everyone involved there. If I could then just go forward in the report to find where I've marked it up, bear with me, sorry. Paragraph 75, just to draw the board's attention to the fact that we've started to plan for this year's long service awards. There will be a larger number of people coming through long service awards this year because the criteria have been adjusted or broadened, perhaps is a better way to describe it, to better reflect groups or other staff within the organisation. And you'll see in paragraph 75 that long service medal clasps recognising what you might want to describe as ultra long service of 30 and 40 years are also now available to go on to the Sovereign's long service and good conduct medal. So there'll be more people coming through those events this year, and I just encourage board members to, if you can, get those dates in your diaries and come along. So they're good opportunities to to hear about the experiences our people have had through their careers, but also stop and say thank you for very long service. A couple of other points to pull out. Paragraph 78 references a new process, what we're now describing as moving on conversations. So this essentially is replacement the exit interview process. Here, learning from those leaving the organisation why they're doing that, recognising again service that's been provided, good work that's been delivered, but also hearing from colleagues any lessons we can identify to improve in the future. I'm really pleased with paragraph 80. So this will be our first ever National Partnership Conference being held on the 31st of March. We've got the Minister for Culture, Skills and Social Partnership opening the event, and it will see trade union colleagues, managers and leaders from across the organisation come together and reflecting on the work that we do in social partnership together. I don't know if Angie, Carl, Hugh, you want to say anything about that?
Only, yeah, that I think the plans are going really well. We've got really good engagement from the trade partner. We're looking at the venue. We just might be quite changed in terms of location to make sure we get the maximum use of the day. But the planning, we've got workshops scheduled, and there's going to be quite a lot of engagement both from managers and TUs to actually really enhance and showcase how we do things in West.
Yes, exactly. We're all looking forward to it. On from that, we're all commercial leads Ace as well. Sometime in March, I can't remember when. 2 TUs with, I can't remember how many managers, but we're all looking forward to it. So progressing it's a journey. What we've started off here, which clearly we're ahead of everybody else.
Yeah, thanks, Hugh.
And just to build on that, and Hugh just made the comment, we're obviously been asked to present at the Ambulance Leadership Forum in March to showcase the development work we did around stepping into each other's shoes from a management and a trade union perspective. So we're delighted to be asked to share that with the ambulance sector in particular.
Thanks both. Paragraph 85, Colin touches on an award that the Education and Development team has received for the blended approach we take to delivery of learning, particularly with technology. So it essentially is, clinical education delivered remotely or in a blended way. The final paragraph in the report I just want to draw out is at 90, bottom of page 21, and this is about diesel emissions. Colleagues will recognise and remember that we've had a number of conversations both here and in committees and other fora about the experience of our people when they are held at emergency departments, particularly through periods of either extreme heat or extreme cold, and the necessity to run the vehicle engine to heat or cool the saloon and the patient treatment area. That, of course, creates an unpleasant environment for our people with the smell of those diesel fumes. We've taken a step this year to deploy, and you can see it in paragraph 90, a particular type of heater, electric heater, with support of Health Board colleagues. Additional power supplies have been in some cases already deployed and are being deployed emergency departments on the ramps, which will enable us to put these electric heaters in the back of the vehicle and negate the need for the engine to run, so improving the environment for our people. Nevertheless, we wouldn't want them to be delayed at the emergency department, but that's, we recognise and understand why that occurs. So what we're seeking to do here is mitigate the impact of that and improve the workplace experience for our people. They're already in and have been for a number of weeks, I think, at the Grange, and we've got quite a lot of positive feedback coming in from that experience. So good to see those. And then the final thing I just want to draw the board's attention to isn't in the report, but this is Race Equality Week, which runs from the 3rd to the 7th of February. And our BEAM network is encouraging everyone to get involved. There'll be a different theme every week, every day through that week, with information and contact details available on Siren. And on the Friday of that week, there'll be a 30-minute session hosted by the network to share kind of people's experiences. In addition to that, on the 23rd of February, we'll be attending an expo in Cardiff to reach out to diverse communities and showcase the opportunities, employment opportunities, volunteering opportunities which exist here in WAS. On the 4th of March, an event will be held at Beacon House to break the fast for Muslim colleagues, and again, everyone is welcome to attend that. And then, of course, the final point there, to draw out, is that Ramadan runs through March. We'll be undertaking a number of events to recognise that for colleagues too. So I'll stop there, Colin,
Okay.
And happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Jason. So questions to Chief Executive?
Just some observations and one question for Johnny, I think, which I'm happy to take offline if easier. So I think it's been a really difficult time, and we've talked about this already, the extreme pressure. And, when you look at this report, having just had the experience of going out and doing several visits and hearing from staff the level of change that's going on, it is really difficult. And I think, as vice chair, as a non-exec director, I recognise that it's really important but challenging. So I just wanted to acknowledge that point. And I think, when you go on the visits and you hear from staff, and we're asking about, what happened during that incident, what was it like for you? Staff were really constructive, and, they recognise actually that everything that's being done around that. So I think, it's a positive from a negative. So I just wanted to share that. And also I just wanted to come back to the mental health response vehicle. So very happy to take that to vice chairs then when we've got that evidence. Hopefully that will help in terms of our longer term journey. My question, I think, is Johnny, was just around, all the digital innovation that we're talking about and the opportunity with the NHS app. So, I know from presentations we've had in vice chairs that in England, now this is being used a lot more than it is in Wales, and it feels like there's a significant opportunity for us. I just wonder whether that's factoring in our, ambition. I assume particularly for 111.
Yeah, there's probably two parts to that. So there's a series of workshops already been undertaken across Wales and different health providers and partners to have a look at what does the future state of the NHS app look like. So we're already feeding into that process. Thinking about 111 as a digital front door, I've talked with colleagues many times about the significant opportunities I think we have across Wales here. So we're already engaged with Welsh Government, we're engaged with the HCW, so the health partners, to start to shape what that future vision looks like. And I think this just goes beyond throwing more technology there. I think this is a real opportunity to make some radical changes. So we're trying to bring those two programmes together with the support of Welsh Government. So it's very much underway. I think we'll see a lot more in space this year. It's a very exciting time.
Good, thanks, Harry. Thanks. Brianna.
I think you were before me.
Who's hand? Bethan. Oh, so sorry, Bethan. Bethan.
Thank you, Chair. Just two comments from me very quickly, if I can, please. First one is in relation to the mental health response vehicle, and during the visits that I've done in January, there was so much positive feedback from our staff around this development, and I so hope we can continue to further progress this, because we know the number of people with mental health issues continues to increase and grow. But there was a lot of positive feedback from staff across the areas I visited. And my second comment is with regards to paragraph 4, which is the Welsh language call answering at 111, and I'm just delighted to see the level of progress we've achieved. I wanted to acknowledge that and thank all colleagues involved in that, because it's so important when people call us, they don't know they want to speak in their first language, the language of choice. So that was really heartening to see that. So thank you to all.
Thanks, Beth. And on that point, by the way, when I was at call centre up in St Atholl earlier in January, the manager was telling me, I think the most recent cohort of people they've recruited for training, I'm speaking from memory, so forgive me, but I think he told me that out of 11 people who were joining a training course, 9 were Welsh language speakers, which, is again reflective of that. It's a very positive response. Brianna.
Thank you. I just wanted to be very encouraging on the diversity and inclusion focus, and I'd be interested to know more about what our kind of strategic approach to that is. I too have got a question around the mental health response, but obviously I haven't got the context like other colleagues have at this point. So I just wondered the plans around the data presentation, I guess, in terms of understanding the totality and the impact, therefore, that this initiative, so we can track how the initiative is progressing. And the other question in that space, I'm curious to understand whether the experience and the kind of the monitoring of whether there's a call again from the I didn't say that very clearly.
No, but I get what you mean.
You knew what I meant.
Okay, Liam, do you want to pick that up?
Yeah. And if we do, because I was going to ask a similar question actually, but I might just pad it out if I might, because I was just wondering whether we got that 40% dealt with on scene. I'm sure you've got the data, but it'd be really interesting to know comparative wise, which I think is what you're alluding to, as to how many people might have been conveyed, how many of those 40% might have been conveyed, what conveyance was not necessary. And I mean, certainly I'm sure you can answer it now, but it'd be very interesting if even if it's possible to try and get a sense of cost savings, because clearly some of this dealt on site, although it's not a cost saving for us particularly, there must be a fantastic system cost saving of not conveying somebody who then has to wait for many hours in A&E and perhaps go through a more complicated and not necessarily terribly appropriate model. But anyway.
It absolutely is that question, but I think it's also important to understand whether how effective it is in terms of, do they call again, an hour later?
That's the all right, Liam.
Okay, thank you. So I think it's really important. So what we've done in our presentation for the GSET report here is highlight the initiative and the innovation, which is the use of mental health practitioners working out of a vehicle in EMS, in the emergency medicine medical service. It is a part of our offer, and it's really important that we hold on to the fact that we have a very strong remote offer, which is active 365 days a week, 12 hours a day, that could be enhanced and this complements it. I think it's really important to note that in measuring effectiveness, we're still finding our way here between what is the balance of our remote and our face-to-face. When you bring something new in, you start to shift the clinical behaviour and the clinical expectations. So I just want to kind of start from it's the totality of the mental health service that we need to be measuring. It's not necessarily just a single intervention. In terms of being able to do that, we did a really good evaluation with Aneurin Bevan, which led us into the South East space. So we know that this has a positive impact. And one of the things that the team are going through at the minute is to get to a position where we've got CARA in the South East we've recruited. So we've got quite a big shift in the team. So remote clinicians who have gone back out onto the road, people who have just come into the organisation getting used to working in this setting. So there's a number of variables here when we talk about effectiveness and measurement. To support us, there are two things that we are doing to make sure we can measure effectively. The accountability, responsibility for reviewing this sits within our clinical model transformation board. So this is a work stream that fits through the RICS, through the Remote Integrated Care Service Programme, and comes into the clinical model transformation. But that's where you would expect to see, from a board member's perspective, that ongoing measurement and assurance that we're doing and making the right decisions. Alongside that, I have an external organisation just commencing work with us this week. And one of the things that they are working to help me understand is how we can do better at value-based healthcare assessments of the innovations that we make and how we make contributions in that space. And the mental health piece is a really important part for me, because we have a model for urgent and crisis response across Wales, which anecdotally I would say could be more effective and more efficient. And I think if we can demonstrate what our contribution is into that, it might help us in other areas across the country for these people who are calling us because other services are not able to reach them at that moment in time. The final comment then is in recontact. So we, because our numbers are low, there's quite a lot of manual work done around recontact. So we are confident from the Aneurin Bevan that the recontact rate is very, very low. So I can't state that as fact for the South East rollout, but I can state for the Aneurin Bevan we did a detailed recontact analysis to demonstrate that that was kept low. And the work that Johnny and I are doing is working closely with Digital Healthcare Wales to understand how we can load our data into their environment in such a way then that we can do proper pathway analysis and look not just at recontact rates over kind of a day or two, but actually look at recontact rates and outcomes for those individuals across a range of pathways over a longer period.
Okay.
Right, good. Any other questions looking around? Can't see any other. Yes.
It's not a question, it was just an additional comment because we had, just in relation to the D&I reference that you made there. We were awarded level 1 carers confident in January. We were the first ambulance service to receive that. Still, we've got a long way to go to obviously get to the level that we would like, but I think it's worth recognising because it does reflect the large number of staff we have in the organisation who are working carers. So I just wanted to make a note of that.
Okay, I've just got a couple of things I'll answer that then. On your comment, Jason, about the electrical connections for, removing or trying to remove some of the unpleasant exhaust. When I went to Wrexham Hospital, I just was noting that I thought the way in which the electrical cables were being connected in the overhead gantries on the route was really effective. And I mean, they weren't in use at that time yet, but they're obviously getting rolled out. But it has been done well, because the worry was that we might have electrical cables kind of running around the place and what have you. But these are all fixed in the gantry, they're hanging down, they're on pull cords, and it just looked very, very professional, actually, which is great. One other question, which is not in your report, but I just wonder, I'm not quite sure, it's probably to Liam, actually, maybe to Andy on the screen. I just wonder if we're going to get a report in due course on the end of life pilot, which was being run, the palliative care pilot, which was being run. I think the 6 months pilot probably ran out, ran out at the end of the last calendar year. And I just wonder whether we're going to get a report on how that is and whether it could be extended and what the plan is.
Yeah, Andy.
Yes, it is being extended. We've got some plans in front there, actually, with SLT, I think next week. In terms of feeding that plan through, happy to do that in due course, if that helpful then, Colin.
Great, no, that's fantastic. Good. And the only other comment I had was it was great when I went up to Wrexham going to the Taelwi house where the 111 call centre has been in place for some time, to see the work Chris has actually started on the first floor above, which means that the 999 call centre, which is in very unpleasant and old patchy conditions a few miles up the road, will eventually be joining them. So it's good to see, because that's been sort of rumbling on a long
It has
time.
been a while, yeah. The work will be completed, well, before the end of this month.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that sounds really nice to see. Who's got the hand up?
I think Andy's got his hand up.
No, it's just residual indication that he was speaking. Don't worry.
Oh, okay. No hand up from Andy. Okay, thank you, Jason. I think we've exhausted questions. So in that case, we will move on. And talking about questions, we move on to questions. Questions from members of the public. So Estelle, you have a question.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm glad we haven't exhausted questions from the public, even if we have in the room. And we have a question. It's only the one today, but it's from Catherine Fuchs MP, who's the MP for Monmouthshire. And Catherine's question is, how do you plan to reduce ambulance waiting times at the Grange Hospital in Cwmbran? So I'm going to start, I think, with Lee with a response to that, if I may.
Thanks, Estelle. So in order to reduce ambulance waiting times in emergency departments, let's just talk nationally, I think, because I think we'd accept that it's not an issue unique to Nara and Bevan. The Trust has taken a number of strategic and tactical steps. And if there's anyone who actually wants to get into some more of the detail, because I'm not going to, in this narrative answer, get into all of that detail. We, of course, do have our ball papers, both today, but much more detail perhaps contained historically in our mitigating avoidable harm papers. So I would refer anybody who's listening to this response also to take a look at those papers. But after over the last few years, we have grown our frontline workforce and relatively significantly as well. But what we have seen from that is, in the face of the volume of lost capacity due to the handover delays, it's just not enough to fill the gap. So we have therefore worked to safely reduce the need to take patients to hospitals to begin with, because of course, by virtue of doing that, our aim is therefore to reduce the pressure that's being experienced on the emergency department. So what are some of those things that we have done? We have grown in the last year our advanced paramedic practitioner workforce by another 32 to improve and raise the level of clinical decision making in the community. And we know from our evidence that where we can effectively use those clinicians who have the benefit in most parts of Wales of rotating through primary care, we know that they are able to resolve more episodes of care safely in the community. We've grown our remote clinical workforce quite significantly this year, putting almost 30 clinicians up front, much earlier contact with patients' journeys to try and best flow those, which has been a fantastic step for us. We've worked behind the scenes to bring together our remote offer. So this is through Clinical Support Desk and 111. And I think most significantly this year was gaining the traction and buy-in from health boards that all pathways between those two services should be available to each service, which means regardless of how a patient chooses to access our service, we can still offer the same pathway outcomes, which is fantastic. We've just spoken about the mental health response vehicle, which of course we've seen can avoid taking mental health patients into emergency departments, which, as you alluded to, Colin, for many of those patients is just not the right place for them. It's been exciting to take steps on the Connected Support Cymru project, recognising that that case still doesn't have full support, but we have been able to progress some technology solutions for some remote monitoring, but also growing our volunteer numbers with the community welfare responder role to be able to feed more information in from the patient side to our remote clinicians, enhancing their ability to perhaps manage patients either at home or into other parts of the health system. And this winter, of course, we also had an adjustment to our clinical safety plan where the can't send was in essence removed from many of the lower levels of the plan, which brought that activity into the Trust. And the purpose of doing that, again, it was to try and navigate those patients to options within health that are not the emergency department, conscious that for those patients whose needs we cannot meet due to our lost capacity, maybe walking into emergency departments, therefore compounding our challenge of having timely handovers. All of that being said, of course, we have to sustain our engagement with both government commissioners and health boards in terms of making improvements in handover times at emergency departments. I'm pleased, of course, of the opportunities in two of our health boards, Swansea Bay and Hywel Dda, where space is made available to us as handover areas. Now, that doesn't necessarily result in faster handovers, but what it does improve is the experience for patients and, importantly, the experience for our people as well. So I am grateful to those areas where space has been made available to us in order to do that. The reality, however, is that the handover times remain too high. There has been a desire to see all 1 hour handovers reduce. It's not the experience that we are seeing, and so it does just really underscore the need for a continual focus on improving flow into and out of hospitals.
Thank you, Lee. Okay.
Yes, and that was the only question
Okay.
today. So as usual, I usually make a plea, don't I? We are an open board. We're always happy to take questions in this session at board. So if anybody watching wants to pose a question to our next board meeting towards the end of March, then do please let us know.
Thank you very much. Good. Okay, we move on then to item number 8, which is our safe staff or patient experience. We have a short video. You did remind me, shouldn't I? I'm sorry, who was going to introduce this?
This will be Lee.
Lee. Okay, so Lee, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair. I'm thrilled to be able to introduce this story today. Last year, our volunteer car service made over 41,500 journeys. We know that was clocking up near 1.5 million miles across most of it across Wales, but of course further afield than that. And a proportion of our service users and non-emergency patient transport service users are frequent and quite often in a very difficult period of their life. So if we do think about our renal dialysis patients and our oncology patients, and cancer touches many of our lives, either as having to battle cancer itself, or of course knowing someone who will be very close to us who has to do so. Oncology patients also requiring a period of often very intensive and regular therapies and treatments. So in order to enhance their experience of transport and also to make volunteering more rewarding for our volunteer car service drivers, we've engaged in a pilot that pairs a volunteer with a patient for the period of their treatment. So in this video, we're going to hear from one of our volunteer drivers, Howard, a patient, Michael, and one of our supporting staff members, Nicola, about the pilot and its impacts.
Good, thank you. Like Alex is about to try the video, she's got that look of concentration.
And its impacts.
Driving for the voluntary car service for nearly 6 years now, and I basically work when I feel like it, and it's working out really well. Sometimes I take a couple of months off and I go back to the voluntary car service ever since.
Our volunteer car drivers do an amazing job taking patients across Wales to and from their
It's
hospital
working out really well. Sometimes I take a couple of months off and I go back to.
Shall we restart and try again? We seem to have got two soundtracks running, didn't we?
I think it might be because I'd enabled closed captioning. Possibly or muting the room. Sorry, I don't normally need to mute the room, so bear with me. I'll just try again.
Joy of new kit.
Yeah, exactly.
Closed
Yeah, that's fine.
captioning temporarily.
Whilst you're doing that,
Bear with me. I'll just try again.
Joy of new kit.
Yeah, exactly.
Closed
Yeah, that's fine.
captioning temporarily.
Whilst you're doing that,
I'll just try again.
Driving for the voluntary car service
Yeah, exactly.
for nearly 6 years
fine.
now, and I basically work when I feel like it, and it's working out really well. Sometimes I take a couple of months off and I go back to it. It's been like that
Yeah, exactly.
nearly 6 years.
Circulate the video.
I think we should do that. Yes, I think that's right. And we'll make sure we'll circulate it, and maybe if we can get the technology, we have got some new technology here, so there's obviously a little bit of a gremlin there. But I'll come to it. But whilst we do that, I will just make a point, if I may, particularly for people, anybody who's sort of listening from the public. Our volunteers are so essential to what we do, and it's fantastic that we've got so many of them. There's well over 800, between 800 and 1,000, I think, both community first responders and the welfare responders and the car drivers. They're amazing. And one of the things that I'm really proud of actually here is that we engage with them in so many of our sort of other activities, like long service activities. We had the volunteers conference, which I attended a few months ago. You know, they are a really important part of it. And what's wonderful is when you speak to them, as we saw actually, although we couldn't quite hear him, but you saw him there. You know, they have uniforms, many of them. They feel like they're part of the establishment. We welcome them into our premises, into our ambulance stations. They really are part of the WAS family, which is fantastic, and it does an amazing job. So with that said, sorry Trish, I was interrupting.
No, I was just going to say we might see if we've got time in the break to see if we can correct that to try and bring it back.
Yeah, absolutely.
As you say, it's new kit, and sometimes with the Zoom and the live stream, those things are not always greatly compatible. So we'll give it a go in the break and see if we can get
have a little practice and see if we can. So if we can run it again later in the agenda, we will. Otherwise, we will circulate it, and maybe we'll try and play it next board meeting as well. So anybody external can see it. Okay, so in that case, we'll move on from item number 8, and we'll go to item number 9, which is to you, Jason, and it's our mitigating harm paper.
Great, thank you, Colin. So this is the regular update for the board on the actions to mitigate avoidable harm. This is, colleagues will remember, this is a new version of the paper. Essentially, the actions are managed now in a range of other fora, and this paper seeks to bring together and draw attention to the kind of the level of harm that we've been managing since we last met. If I go to paragraph 7, it sets out the number of patients. 585 patients are estimated to have come to some level of harm outside emergency departments in December last year. And just over 10,000 patients had their call cancelled, or we couldn't attend to them in December. Of course, you remember I mentioned a couple of minutes ago in my report a critical incident on the 30th of December, and that extreme pressure, very significant pressure we had towards the end of the month. There were 3,185 red incidents categorised as red in the month of December. Of course, those attracting or requiring a response within 8 minutes in 65% of occasions. The board will be familiar with the fact that we didn't meet and haven't met that target for some time now. But the point I just want to draw out, and this takes us to the dashboard, the data dashboard, which accompanies the paper, is that in December, as I said, 3,185 incidents were categorised as red. That's nearly 1,000 more than the prevailing 2-year average, and 400 more than we saw in November. And the point to make here is that despite the fact that we're not hitting the 65% target, many more patients, by function of volume, are getting a response in 8 minutes than we've seen before. Nearly 1,000 more in December than the prevailing average over the last couple of years. Other points I just want to draw out on that data dashboard, if I can, is the number of shift overruns. So this is reflective of the extreme pressure we were seeing in December. So just shy of 4,200, nearly 700 more than the previous month. Lost hours in December were at a quarter of the entire fleet, so 25.5% of the entire fleet lost to emergency department handover delays through December. And of course, that's the single biggest issue which impacts our ability to be able to respond to patients in communities in a timely fashion, and of course also drives the shift overrun experience for our people too. In terms of conveyance, this is just worth drawing out too. Penultimate one on the left-hand side, 31% of patients in December just gone were conveyed to emergency departments across Wales. That's down 5% to the prevailing 2-year average, and down slightly on November as well. And then some other figures just to draw out on the right-hand side. Lee's referenced this already in response to the question from a member of the public, but the number of 1 hour of patient handovers in excess of 1 hour in December were nearly 600 more than the prevailing 2-year average. And the number of patient handovers in excess of 4 hours were nearly 300 more than the prevailing 2-year average in December. So I suppose what it seeks to paint is a very, very difficult set of circumstances through the last couple of months and particularly in December. But despite all that, nearly 1,000 more patients got a response in 8 minutes than the prevailing average over the last 2 years. So I'll stop there, Chairman, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. And I would just add the other interesting statistic is, I mean, 3,000 is a huge number of red calls, but that is only a fraction of the number of calls coming into the 999 call centre, up 20%, I think, and there are over 10,000 of the next highest category, the Amber 1 category. So the number of calls coming in to the call centre during December was amazing, huge. Questions to James? Andy has his hand up. Right, Andy, over to you.
It's not a question, Colin, but I just thought it might give the board some kind of perspective. So you'll see in the left-hand column, on the dashboard, the line at the bottom of the average jobs per shift. So I left when I was operational, which was full-time, when the last time I was fully-time operational was 2002. I would have done at least somewhere between 7 to 10 jobs in a shift. So to give it some perspective, the sheer number of the drop-off of patients seen by individual clinicians on a daily basis is really quite stark. I think that was the column that really stood out to me more than any other one in terms of our ability to respond. It shows the limitations that's now imposed upon us by the number of jobs an individual crew can see each day.
Thanks, Andy. And I would say that when I've been speaking to crews tell me that their experience of the numbers of patients they would see in a shift, even just going back to pre-COVID days of perhaps, I don't know, what sort of 2017, 2018, 2019, they would have expected to see that sort of number then. So I don't think it's something that goes back to 2002. I think it's more recent than that. It has been a more recent sort of issue. Thanks, Andy. Andrew.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I'm just interested in the immediate release data for red and amber calls, and I was wondering if maybe you could send me the split between which health boards you're referring to in the paper. That's okay.
So yeah, there are splits available. Just to share our continued engagement with health boards in relation to the experience. Reds are infrequent now. There has been a good improvement and a sustained improvement on red. Those that are not accepted are all explored, and results are shared back directly to health boards each week. It comes actually out of my office to the chief operating officers. So we do have that feedback into health boards. The amber, there are too many for us to do all of them, so we do test the amber, and much of that testing is to test our compliance with the protocols that are established. What you'll see is that there's variation across the country, and there is generally some correlation to the sites where the time lost to handover delays are greater. Frequently, also the sites where the ability to release is somewhat impeded as well. So there are some correlations, but we certainly do have it on health board level.
Thanks, Andy. And for your information, we talked a little bit about this at the last board meeting, didn't we? We've reflected the fact that generally the red releases are accepted, but amber releases, there's a lot of rejection of amber releases, as we've seen in the data. So a number of hands have gone up. I think I saw Kerry. So we go to Kerry and then we'll go to Bethan and then we'll come around the table.
So it's a really difficult read, this report, isn't it? You know, it's conversations that we have in Quest, and that 585 people, it's a really difficult read. So I had a couple of questions. So the coding for red patients. So I can see that there's been that increase in demand. Is there any changes to coding that would have impacted on that as well? Are there now more red calls, categorised as red calls, that previously would have been amber. I think for me, and I messaged Rachel about this yesterday, there's something for me in the dashboard, and I know you said at the last meeting, Jason, this was going to evolve around contextualising the volume of red responded instance and amber 1 responded instance. So I appreciate we don't want this dashboard to be too big, but there is something around context, particularly if you think about somebody looking into this that's maybe not, familiar with the MIQPR. So I think that would be helpful. Yeah, that's my own question.
All right, Lee, do you want to pick up the categorisation and coding issue, and then perhaps Rachel, you just might want to comment on the context and how we might be able to do that.
Yeah, thank you. No, there hasn't been any recent coding change. The driver underneath this is breathing problems. Now we've had various conversations in relation to breathing problems, also some with the committees as well, because we have a continual, we are continually monitoring what's happening with breathing problem activity to try and understand if there's anything underlying. We have long assessed the effectiveness now of MPDS in terms of correctly identifying patients who require an emergency versus a non-emergency response for a breathing problem. We are as concerned about over triaging as we are under triaging, and it's very, very difficult for us to absolutely get that right for every single caller. It's very challenging, and we are not unique in that experience. We're also not unique in terms of seeing this quite dramatic increase in red category breathing problem incidents, either as an ambulance service. It's pretty much across the UK, all grappling with this same trend. For us, there is absolutely an opportunity to try and through some of the steps that we're beginning to take with our clinicians engaging earlier up front to determine whether the red breathing is appropriate for each of those patients. What we need to recognise and understand here is that there is, whilst we know that there could be harm by under triaging, because that could mean that individual patient may not get a response as quickly as they require it, we have to recognise and appreciate that there is equal risk with over triaging, because that means we are rushing to a patient who may not need it, which could be at the consequence of another patient who is not receiving that response. So this is a real challenge in landing this, but this is why we're very much now of a view we would like earlier clinical involvement in our. There's a particular code amongst all of these. We know that there's a particular code that drives a high level of activity where the presentation could be very different based on the individual patient. Demographic, age, location, etc., etc. So hopefully that helps to sort of colour that in. It's a real challenge.
Rachel, do you want to pick up the second point around the kind of context?
Yeah, so we were just chatting about this a bit earlier, and there is some of that data is in the MIQPR. So the total volumes of red and the total volumes of amber are in the MIQPR report, and it's a balance, isn't it, between having a dashboard that is small enough to kind of really highlight the kind of key issues, but also meaningful enough that, as you say, that then allows people looking in to kind of get that real sense of the context. So I've got an answer to that, because we've tried to slim down the numbers of metrics in this dashboard, but we will have a look at that outside and see if we can see what we can do about that.
It's worth saying, Richard, that the MIQPR data is also in the pack, so
yes, exactly,
anybody who's looking in could look at both, although obviously it's a bit more difficult to extract it from the MIQPR because it runs into multiple pages.
That's right.
But the point is trying to summarise it. And there is Liam, and then I think Bethan was in first. So shall we come to Bethan next?
Can I just come in on that point? So everything we've talked about in terms of code sets and definitions is all really pertinent. I think we need to acknowledge that the level of community infection during winter was excessive. So we had 4 viruses in very high circulation, causing very high levels of infection in people who are increasingly frail with comorbidities. and that puts a significant amount of pressure on the whole of the NHS. Those are the conditions that exacerbate pre-existing conditions and come through to us in that respiratory cohort. So if you think about a patient who's got bronchiectasis, somebody who's got COPD, these are the patients that are most susceptible to deterioration, and these are the patients that are coming through to us and then could be coded as ineffective breathing. That's the terminology. I think I just want to add to the tribute to our people in this space. So during December, we had around about 51,999 calls. And if you look at the numbers across the MIQPR and in the highlight report, and we do need to read these things together, the number of no sends that we had, so the number of times we told people we didn't send an ambulance was 10,500, which in the scheme of that increase in demand was small. I mean, we held our position really effectively. And what that does for Wales, so it adds what our people are holding, it adds to what we are doing to support patients at home, to support families at home with people who are in situations. What it does for the people of Wales is actually it supports our health boards as well, because it's us trying to hold the risk, trying to support people to get them into hospital at the right time, and not ask people to just turn up at the emergency department and add to the stress and the strain that was being experienced there. So I think that there's a huge amount of work that Andy and I, with Lee, but from a clinical perspective, have been doing with front-ending some of the senior clinical decision-making, supporting our remote integrated care clinicians to feel confident with care planning and holding care. And in doing that, we are hoping that we are contributing to a better overall position in the wider system. But I just think we need to hold on to the fact that that particular month and the level of communicable disease that was out there was excessive, and it brought most health systems in the UK into a very challenging position.
Absolutely, indeed.
Thank you, Chair. So Kelly's covered some of my points, but there's just one or two nuances I wanted to add, if I can, please. Without a doubt, the data is exceptionally concerning, and I've no doubt when we meet at Quest next Tuesday, we will talk in more detail around that and delve into some of that. And the comment that Andy made was interesting for me in terms of when he was a practitioner and the number of people he would go to support during the shift, and those numbers have reduced dramatically. That was a comment that I heard repeatedly in the 3 visits I did to our staff in 2 stations and outside an ED. That was something that came out very, very strongly. And also, you know, we talk all the time about the impact on patients, and that's crucial, and that's front and centre of who we are and what we do. However, the risk for staff, not just in terms of their morale, but the skill fade was a very, very frequent comment that was being made to me. And that's concerning, isn't it? Looking medium, longer term, you know, in terms of our staff and our ability to respond to the more complex cases that we'll have to respond to in the community. However, moving away from that, the question that I have is in relation to paragraph 8, which talks about the clinical model transformation, if I can please, and I'm aware that we've started to deliver some of that, certainly in terms of the rapid clinical screening in December. And I just wondered, are there any early signs? Is there any early feedback on how effective that is? Noting it was introduced at a time when the pressure was at its highest. However, are there any early signs that we can get from this? Is it achieving the impact we were hoping?
Okay. So just I'll ask Rachel, if I can, Bethan, to perhaps comment on that as the SRO for the programme, recognising that some elements of it are turned on, but not all of it. And yeah, we've got a number more to come in the next few months. And of course, we've also got consideration of other aspects of the clinical model being undertaken through a task and finish group sponsored by the Cabinet Secretary. Just on the skill decay point you mentioned, there's also a skill acquisition problem for new people. So there's a skill decay element for existing staff, given the number of patients they're seeing has dramatically dropped per shift. But there's also a problem for new staff.
And that was being discussed,
Yeah.
Jason, I have to say, lots of noodle codes.
Yeah, so that, yeah, right, it created all sorts of problems, issues for us, which emerge from this. But that will be a medium to long-term problem. So Rachel, just on the kind of what we've turned on so far and what we're seeing.
Yeah, so this is December data, and actually we turned on not a huge amount in December. So if we think about the whole model, we turned on that's clinical screening for green calls and for amber 2 calls. So there's still the large bulk of amber 1 and red calls that we have not yet turned on. And it probably in those 2 latter cohorts that we'd be expecting to see the bigger impact. I think the amber 1 calls we're turning on latest is early February, I think. Red is then dependent on those discussions that Jason's alluded to in relation to Cabinet Secretary and how he wants to move forward in terms of that red performance target. So in the wider model, we talked about the mental health vehicle. It's one vehicle in amongst, many areas that don't have that vehicle. In terms of APP schedule, APP work, we have introduced more APPs, but the scheduling that is part of the programme is still being tested. So there's a lot more to do, I suppose, is the point. There is stuff that we've been doing, as Liam alluded to, in terms of things like care planning. So we've created a desk within the CSD essentially at the moment that will really try to maximise every opportunity to find different pathways for people without the need to send an emergency ambulance or a face-to-face response. And the team have done a huge amount of work with health boards to find alternative and develop new pathways. But all of that is still quite incremental, and some big shifts are yet to come, I think. And I suppose just to allude to Liam's point, which is that where we make changes, we are making changes within the context of a system that is still extremely pressured and was even more pressured than normal in December, particularly in relation to that virus, those viruses circulating and things. So as we track data, it is quite hard because we're tracking improvements in a system which is itself getting worse. So we are developing that dashboard, a separate dashboard almost, in terms of what are the impacts of the clinical model transformation that we're expecting to see, and how is that playing out. Some of it should be the same as the MIQPR we see already. Some of them may be some additional ones. So it's early days. It's the short answer to that. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Bethan. Rhiannon, I think next.
Yeah, I also want to emphasise the dashboard data completion, if you like. I think it's a really constructive way that the trust can be really open and transparent by providing the elements that aren't there. And I would also add, the targets for me were a struggle in the fact that they weren't in there. So I think it's brilliant to have a dashboard, but I do think it needs that context. So sorry to re-emphasise that point. So I was just curious to understand the confidence level in the modelling around harm, because clearly that's not based on actual. So I just wondered how confident we were in that.
Yeah.
If you're able to, Liam.
Yeah, so I think that kind of just on the earlier point, Rhiannon, so I think within the dashboard that we have for this report, I think what we have is a range of indicators. So I just want to be clear, we don't have targets in this space, so we have parameters that we seek to aspire to as an organisation. These are indicators that from an operational and delivery perspective give us a good sense of where we're doing well, where we can seek improvement, and where we need to kind of escalate. So I think it's important we separate that out from the MIQPR, where we do reference our targets and we're really clear about where we're performing and where we need to improve. The answer to your question is that the assumptions that are built into this mitigating harm report come from a study that was led through the Association of Ambulance Chief Execs. It was built up with some very senior eminent colleagues in emergency care, London-based. And so the underlying methodology is clinically sound in terms of making extrapolating our level of delay with the level of harm that is likely. When we look at our PTR report, which is taken in detail through Quest, over time you see those numbers balance out. So what you don't see, and this again is the data challenge, what we don't necessarily see is that we have an extrapolation in the board report December today. We go into our Quest meeting next week, and those numbers will match, because quite often what we get is a delay in the reporting. We often see the catastrophic and the serious harm coming through very quickly, but the moderate and the lower levels of harm are not as visible. So the level of reporting is lower directly within our organisation. We're therefore dependent on the work we do with our health boards. So, for example, tissue viability, we wouldn't necessarily report on tissue viability. That would be picked up through the health board as a community acquired pressure ulcer. So some of our numbers at that level are not directly with us. They're very much done in correlation with partners. And I referenced earlier the work that Johnny and I are doing with Digital Healthcare Wales. I think this is where the NDR, the National Data Resource, is so important, because that's where we will be able to really overlay our data and truly get an understanding of where the minor, the moderate harm in particular is playing out in the wider system, and we are better able then to define what's in our gift. I would want to assure the board that even though our people are educated and trained in emergency response, for those of us that spend time with our crews who are caring for people for extended periods in the back of an ambulance, they take every opportunity to try and make sure those fundamentals of care that minimise that harm is taken. So I've worked with a number of people who work quite hard at times have to work quite hard to get food and nutrition or to get food and drink for people over extended periods, and they take steps to make sure they mobilise people, they move people where they can within the ambulance environment as well. So while we don't have all-sightedness, our people have learned over time to document, to recognise the care that they need to give in a 3, 6, 12, 24, 36-hour window, which is not part of their core skill set, but has become necessary to try and mitigate that harm overall.
Thank you. Good, thank you very much. Nothing on the screen. Any other comments in the room? I think we've probably completed that. So thank you very much. And the situation remains pretty bleak, really. Okay, item 9 complete then. So we move on to item number 10, which is, we've been talking about already, the NIQPR. Rachel.
Yes, thank you. And of course, as you just mentioned, we've touched on a fair amount, particularly in relation to EMS services. One of the things perhaps we didn't touch on, and I will just mention, is the excellent levels of production. So in terms of our EMS service, we really are doing extremely well in keeping the number of hours that we produce up at our commissioned levels, and that is really important for our commissioners to understand as well. In terms of our 111 service, you'll see here that the kind of headline figure, which is the abandonment rate, has gone up in December. And some of that is about the demand and the spikes in demand that we see during that period. So just to kind of note that this remains a focus for commissioners, for Welsh Government colleagues when we talk to them. And you'll see in the SBAR that the action that we're taking here is to secure the services of an external organisation to help us with how do we look at our rostering patterns to deal with, very, very acute spikes in demand. When obviously when you're trying to roster that, it's not necessarily easy to manage that, particularly when there's spikes in demand that often don't last very long. So that company or a company is being procured currently, and that company will help us to see whether there are any opportunities to do that more effectively. But we continue to, I think there's a recognition within the commissioners and Welsh Government that it is difficult. It's not easy, but it remains something that they talk to us regularly about. In terms of other areas of focus within the MIQPR, you can see there's obviously the metrics around our people. We've touched on some of those again in the harm report, because we can see the overruns is a factor in terms of staff well-being, but we can also see a slight shift up in terms of sickness in December. Again, Liam alluded to, with the prevalence of viruses across the community, that naturally affects our staff. I think we would expect to see sickness absence increasing during the winter months, and work continues to try and reduce those. In terms of some of the kind of clinical indicators, we've mentioned this before, but I think it is really good to see that compliance against our bundles, the clinical indicator bundles, is up, as all the actions have been taken, particularly Andy's team, to make sure that staff are recording, and we're pulling out from the staff record, the patient records, the care that they've been providing to patients. So that's a real positive improvement that we've been talking to colleagues in Welsh Government and commissioners about as well. So I think, you've read the report, there's lots in there, as you say, Colin, and happy to take any questions of detail.
Good, thanks, Rachel. It is detailed. It's a really good report, I think. I spent a lot of time poring over this one. So, comments from the table? Yes.
Quick question on immediate release. So the numbers are difficult, aren't they? And I'm just wondering about the policy and procedure from our perspective that sits behind that. So, in terms of what happens when that's triggered, by ODU or whatever that process is, and what sits behind that, is that something that we review? Is that something that we feel would be helpful to review? So I appreciate it, it's been extremely busy and difficult, but I suppose I'm just looking for some assurance that it's still as good as it can be.
Yeah, so I mean, Lee will comment on the detail of this. I think he touched on some of it earlier. So when a red release is declined, they're reviewed. Each and every one of them is, and there's dip sampling, as you mentioned, Lee, in response to the previous question on the ambers, isn't there? The policy has processes for us and escalation across to health board colleagues, which Lee, you might just want to unpack and share.
Yeah, the immediate release protocol was last issued August 24. So it's very current. It's actually a document that I would say we drive. So it gets its reviews and monitoring of adherence. So part of those weekly feedbacks and the DIPSA is all contained within that protocol.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Fiona.
Yeah, it's probably one for Carl. I was just curious to understand whether there's any analysis around underrepresented groups in the disciplinary figures. Some organisations have really highlighted that there's a disproportionate impact, for example, on people from particular ethnic backgrounds. So I just wondered if we segmented it all in that way.
Yeah, we do. So it crosses over from Angie's world and mine in terms of the culture bit, in terms of the EDI. But I think in terms of the process elements, we do have a similar pattern that's emerged here at WAST, and it's work that we're doing with our, with our teams to look at actually, is it a process system issue, or is it actually that we're not hearing the voices coming through? So there's more work to be done on that, but I think I'll defer to Angie in terms of the race elements that we're picking up in the networks.
Yeah, happy to. We've actually met with Welsh Government on that particular point because it was flagged that it seemed that there was a disproportionate number. Obviously, we have a small number of colleagues from ethnic groups anyway in the organisation, but it is a key priority at the moment to try and unpick what is going on there. So watch this space because there will be more work there, and we're very aware of it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? I've got a couple. Last time I made the point, and I'll make it again, I think, because it's important, that despite the fact that we had over 50,000 calls, I think it was, to the 999 sector, the median response time for the 999 answering was still 2 seconds. Yeah. It is true that the 95th percentile slipped, so we know that there is it was kind of skewed to some extent in terms of slightly longer wait times for people ringing. But when people ring 999, they do expect an immediate answer. And for the midpoint, it is still 2 seconds, which is, I think, very commendable. The other comment on what we'll just make, I don't know whether Anjali or Carl, you want to make any comment about this, but about staff turnover, that we've all been on our visits noting that actually, surprisingly, but thank goodness, the morale and motivation of teams out on the front lines actually still is remarkably good, despite overruns, despite the absence of work which they're trained to do, which we've been talking about. But turnover still seems to be relatively modest. We're not seeing a great exit. Would that be a reasonable interpretation?
I think from our perspective, that's absolutely true. I think it is, people are, committed to the roles. They understand the challenges that we face. We work with our team partners to look at things that we can do that are within inside our gift to improve upon the experience, but we're not complacent. So I think making sure we amplify that voice through the networks and pick up any of the key issues and take them forward, that's probably the work that we're focusing on.
Good. Okay. Yeah, I think that's very good for me. Okay. Anybody else got anything else you want to add on MIQPR? Okay. Thank you very much. We'll take one more item and then we'll take a break. We're planning to have a break about, excuse me, about 11:20. So Trish, we'll go to you and then we'll take a break. All right?
Thanks, Chair. So this report is fairly truncated because there are 2 meetings of the board, because we meet bi-monthly. There are 2 that actually we get the same larger back that we got at the previous meeting, because they're reviewed on a quarterly basis. As far as that governance process is concerned, you've got the summary of all of the risks in the appendix, but they have all been reviewed within this period. It's just that the full BAF makes its way through the process on a quarterly basis. We have included the full text of the BAF for our 2 highest rated risks, 223 and 224. And I think it's important to continue to bring that here, notwithstanding that it's the same that you saw last time, but it has been reviewed on a monthly basis because it's a chemical rated risk. And of course, we talk about it when we talk about the avoidable harm paper as well. So I think what's also important from this one is the new risk. Quite a high rated risk related to the Manchester Arena inquiry has made its way on. We've given you the full text of that there. It was discussed in some detail a couple of weeks ago in our Finance and Performance Committee, but it might be worth Lee and perhaps Jane sort of expanding that a bit more, because it is a high rated risk. It's the first time it's hit our principal risk register here at board as well. But just lastly, just before that, is work on the strategic BAF continues. We've had a development session in December. We've got another one in February to talk about risk appetite. And there was a very short survey that went out to board members to gauge what that might look like as well. And of course, the ARAC is monitoring that, and Peter and Rhiannon are very close to that, and Kerry as well. So I'll stop there, Chair.
Good. Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments to Trish? Okay. Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to endorse the good work. As Trish said, ARAC does monitor this, so it's really good to see that that clearly the team are on top of that. And of course, the next development is applying risk appetite to this, which will further enhance the process. So I think that will be a really important development, because it will certainly help to contextualise residual risk, in terms of what is the board's appetite. So we have another session in February, so really looking forward to the next iteration, but just some assurance that the team are clearly on top of this. So thanks to everybody who's contributing to this.
Okay, Jane, did you want to add anything from?
Only to sort of say, in FPC, I think we were quite assured in terms of that risk actually coming on, I think, and recognising that all the work that had already been done on the multiple recommendations from the Manchester Arena inquiry. So we're very much at the sticky end of things now, and very much dependent on funding, etc., all of which is in place. So yes, despite the high level of risk, a certain degree of assurance at this stage.
Good. Okay, fine. Previous papers have all been essentially to note, which of course we duly did. On this particular paper, we were asked to note specifically the new risk, which we obviously do as well. Okay, on that basis, if we've got no further questions, let us take a break. It's conveniently 11:15, so 15-minute break. We'll restart at 2:30.
Right.
Thanks everybody for coming back. That's grand. And we're going to item 12, which is financial performance. So over to Chris. Over to Chris.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Jay. Bringing before board financial performance to the period month 9, end of December, in the 24-25 financial year. This builds on a presentation that was provided to Finance Performance Committee a couple of weeks ago, which the committee received the month 8 detailed report, updated, as I say, for board today for month 9. I'll take the paper as read. I just want to draw out one thing in a sec. The other thing to obviously note is that, you know, we are at a particular point of the financial year now. This month 9 paper, we're effectively in month 10 tomorrow, so we'll be ready month 10 next week, landing sort of into the final quarter of the year, with that balance of, you know, needing to continue to keep the focus on delivery of the current financial year, whilst also now, you know, significantly detailed planning for next year, which we'll pick up later around where that's heading. But in terms of the year to date and the forecast position, still on track. Revenue detail more mainly in the papers, brief update on the capital, because we had some more detailed updates previously on capital. Revenue position, as I say, on track, year to date, and forecast to effectively break even, landing the organisation to a balanced position. The only elements I wanted to just flag, and with one quick update, was around the risk elements that are, you know, and it's an interesting one when we start to get into this time of the year now, particularly to quarter 4, about describing, you know, which we have to do in our returns to government, you know, about quantifying where we can have financial risk of that delivery. When you're getting really close to the end of the year and you're sort of narrowing it down, you'd expect the number and the value and everything of risks, and, you know, if we had any higher priority ones to start to hold down now, clearly, because we should have much more greater certainty of where we're heading as we get closer to it, clearly. So all you see as a result of that is that one risk in terms of value that's been removed or reduced to zero, essentially, in the returns to government this time around, the ability for us in year, and I stress in year, and I'll say it again, in year, to cover the costs we've incurred on the EAP Band 5 development, which, you know, for reasons in the paper and previously described, we know that we've been able to mitigate that increase in year and a lot of cost pressure. We will pick up again what that looks like with the recurrent impact and the increasing impact going forward as part of the next year's planning. And the second one I'm just going to flag was the paper does describe a risk around the pay award funding, driven mainly by the way government have approached it from a cash flow perspective, and that we've invoiced for 70% of that cost, while government and others across NHS Wales were finalising the residual funding elements of it, and just more so technically and slightly tactically in the returns to government, we flagged, you know, that balance is still remaining, and therefore if it's not received, technically it's a risk. But I can confirm that in Directors of Finance meeting last Friday, the Finance Director for NHS Wales verbally updated us all and confirmed that across the NHS in Wales, the funding that we're all assuming in our plans will be funded in full. So that will now be invoiced this month, and that will come out as a risk, so will disappear as a risk again next month. That was all I was going to add. Cheers, book a note in, and obviously happy to take questions.
Great, thank you very much, Chris. So any questions around the table, and I'll Peter and Jane anyway, but you've got your hand up. Go on, Peter.
Okay, no, just a couple of points. Really, it's very encouraging to see this balanced position. Clearly, the year goes on with de-risking, as Chris has articulated. So, you know, I think you can take great confidence from the financial management of the organisation in terms of coming in on budget. I think that's just the point of stress that Chris mentioned. One of those risks was managing the Band 5 increases in year, but of course that's with the costs in subsequent years will ramp up with increments and so on. So none of us should take it as read that because it's been absorbed this year through very good financial management that assumption can continue in future years. But I'm sure Chris and others are on top of that in terms of getting that funded in subsequent years.
Thanks, Peter. Jane, did you want to make anything from FNP?
Just to briefly echo what Peter has said in terms of the confidence we have in the financial management, Chris and his team, that, you know, do great work, but also give us really detailed papers for committee. And I think, you know, there was the alert in the AAA that just to draw board's attention to that. But I think what we picked up was obviously it's critical time now, and there's some really rapid and robust work being done in terms of integrating the financial planning going forward and for the linking that with the planning. So we know that March is going to be a substantive meeting as well, so recognise that.
Good. Okay. Any other questions? Only comment I would make is, I mean, well done, Chris, and great well done to the team for another year. It looks as though we will balance books, all being well. We managed to do it last year in the face of difficult times and substantial cost savings. We looks like, with a fair wind, we will be able to achieve the same this year. But we shouldn't get complacent, because next year is another story. And as every year goes on, it just becomes more and more difficult. So the fact that we've been able to achieve those financial results both this last year and this year, probably, we are not to be lulled into any kind of false expectation, because things are more and more difficult as every year goes by. And you made some questions about the Band 5 increase, or lots of other cost pressures, which we have got to find ways of dealing with, plus additional savings probably coming down the line. So I think next year is going to be definitely as challenging as this, and probably more so. I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about that in the planning for the next agenda item. Yeah. Okay. Good. So no other questions on that, so we can move on. Before we do, I should have said at the outset, actually, when we reconvene, can we give a real heartfelt apology to those 3 individuals who were going to be featured on the video, and that's to Howard Wiltshire, Michael Samuels, and to Nicola Lloyd. If you are watching, I hope you are, if you're watching, I'm really sorry that we were unable to show that video today. It worked perfectly well yesterday in the kind of practice session, but we do have some new technology here, and what appears to have happened is that whilst running the video on its own, there was no problem, but running the video whilst we're also live streaming seemed to cause some kind of feedback, which is why we got that problem where we could see the video, but soundtrack seemed to be duplicated and was just impossible to kind of follow. We will make sure that it is shown. We'll do our very best to make sure that it is shown in its entirety next board meeting. And also we will circulate the video, I believe, to members around the board table, so if people want to watch it in advance, they can. Did you discover whether you could click on it and whether that worked or not?
If it doesn't, we will make sure that it does.
Okay. Well, the conversation we had during the break was that there might have been a possibility in the board papers, if you've got it on your machines, that you might be able to click the link. So that should be great. If that works, that's fantastic. But if it doesn't work, we'll get the video circulated so board members can see it. But we will also return to the item for the benefit of anybody who is external to this meeting at our next board meeting. So sorry to those people, but it won't be lost, because it's very important to us. Volunteers are really important to us. All right.
Sorry, Chair. The update from the last.
Oh, yes. Who wants to give that?
That's for Carl.
That's for Carl.
Thank you.
You know, eventually you'll get a chair who follows instructions.
Yeah.
I mean, I started the second half a minute late. I forgot to give the apology at the outset of our second half. It's not going well, is it?
Perfect.
Carl.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
So I'd just like to provide a brief update following Sian's staff story. As you'll remember, Sian shared her journey at WAST and her inspiring dedication to both her role and the administrative and clerical profession. Since then, it's been a challenging time for Sian. Her focus has been on supporting her dad, who was diagnosed with cancer in December. Understandably, this has been her priority, and I'm sure we all extend our thoughts and support to Sian and her family during this difficult period. Despite these challenges, Sian continues to demonstrate her commitment to her role and to broadening her experience. She has recently taken on the administrative lead role in the Trust Bursary Scheme and remains keen to engage with the work that Joe Kelso is leading on around the admin review recommendations, reflecting Sian's ongoing passion for elevating and championing the admin and clerical profession. While Sian has put her studies on hold for now, she still plans to return to them when the time is right. In the meantime, her dedication and resilience continue to make her and give her a significant impact within our team and across WAST more broadly. So thanks to Sian.
Good, thanks. Okay, so we move on. Item 13 and 14 to do with the integrated medium-term plan. We'll hand over to you in a sec, Rachel. The first item being looking at our current performance, and the second item looking at progress for the future plan.
Yeah, thank
So
you.
over to you.
Thank you. So in terms of the first item, as you say, is a reflection on progress for this year. It's quite a lengthy report actually, and quite detailed in terms of areas where we've made really good progress, some areas where progress has been a little bit slower than we'd want. And hopefully that detail is helpful to colleagues. We've also in this report got a sense of or trying to link the actions that we're taking as part of the IMTP with changes to indicators and metrics. Still in early days, I think, trying to do that, but that was certainly something we've been keen to do this year. And as you will appreciate, as the question as you asked earlier, Bethan, when we're looking at the indicators, for example, in relation to clinical model translation, we're not seeing the swing in yet, but we will continue to monitor that. So I think, as always, Chair, what I say with this report is that there's a huge amount of work going on within the organisation, and I think sometimes when we look at total number of IMTP deliverables, we feel that they're not deliverable, but actually staff from across all of the directorates do deliver on a huge range of issues. And so it's kind of a grateful thanks really to everybody in this room and their teams who do this day in, day out. So happy this, this report goes to Finance and Performance Committee. So we talked about this at that committee in a little bit more detail, but very happy to take any questions on any of that. Thank you.
Good, thanks. Thanks, Rachel. So any questions on performance?
Some feedback and then a question. So, and I think goes back to Bethan's point earlier, actually, in the clinical transformation model. So I actually sat with one of the clinical navigators when I was at VPH the afternoon, and whilst we can't see the evidence and the data here, you could see in real time the impact that was having as I'm going to get the language quite right here, but in terms of going through the stack and looking at who was intervening, and you could actually see the impact of that in terms of those calls and our response changing. So that was really good assurance and actually an enthusiasm around it, which is really good. I had a really specific question which relates to the West Network members taking part in the review of the NHS 111 website. So members will have heard me talk about accessibility quite a lot in the past, and I do think it's something we need to prioritise a little bit more. So in terms of the West Network and Slice public contact, I'm just looking for some assurance that we're thinking about accessibility in its wider sense, particularly around, for me, that sensory loss. So very happy to take it offline because it's a very specific question, but I think particularly when you're thinking about the number of older people that we are supporting that are in contact with us, this was a really important point for the website. So I don't know whether anybody wants to respond, but I'm very happy to take it offline if easier.
Yeah, I'll jump in if I may. Yeah, so there's probably two parts to this. We're doing a short-term piece of work on the 111 website currently, so we've got some resource already working at a reshape and a redesign of the navigation, look and feel, some of the aesthetics on the website. We are already linking in with some of the accessibility standards that NHS England and NHS Digital released as well. We want to go further though, so that longer term ambition in terms of 111 as a front end and what the website could be. There needs to be a much bigger part to play there. We want to make sure we've got that patient voice represented because we've not done that very well so far. So in terms of that case that we're currently building up with Welsh Government, we are going to ensure that we've got the patient voice flowing through that. But there is some work already underway for this winter that we're looking to get launched before the end of March. There's some improvement with more to follow.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Johnny. Thanks, Kerry. Any other questions on there? Okay, in that case, shall we move on to the second item, which is the future planning for the next iteration?
Yes, thank you. And I think since the last board meeting, We've now had our planning guidance issued from Welsh Government in terms of what our plans should include for next year, and you'll see there the priorities for government are around timely access to care, population health, building community capacity, improving mental health access, and enhancing women's health services. That is, quite a coverage because the timely access to care includes urgent care, planned care, cancer care, and diagnostics. So that is a big coverage in terms of kind of priorities from a cabinet secretary perspective. We've also had the allocation letters that have come through, and Chris may want to just pick up on that. But in terms of the process for developing our own IMTP and the priorities, we've had discussions at board development sessions. There will be a first draft which will be circulated following a variety of kind of executive and leadership workshops over the last few weeks. That will be circulated in about mid-February, in advance then of a more detailed discussion, obviously at the Finance and Performance Committee, and then onwards to board at the end of March. Just to kind of note a little bit about the kind of the external work we're doing on this. So clearly our commissioners are key. As we've described before, the JCC is in its first year of being. It is developing processes as it goes, and there probably has been a little bit of lag in terms of that discussion in terms of what's going to be in our IMTP. We are clear from them that there is not likely to be any further money over and above the 1.77% increase, and we have been invited now to a meeting next week, an urgent kind of special meeting to discuss, what sort of things we're putting in our IMTP, the sort of choices we might have to make in terms of, the limited pot of money that we've got. But we do have an exec meeting with the JCC now in a couple of weeks' time, which hopefully will start to build that relationship in a really positive way with colleagues, our commissioning colleagues. So I wasn't going to say anything else particularly about that, but I think Chris, from a financial perspective, it would be really useful to.
Yeah, just if I can, just very briefly, I'm going to probably pick this up in a little bit more detail later, but just to add to that, that Rachel has highlighted and is in the paper. So yeah, so the NHS Wales, as they call it, allocation letter was issued on the 20th of December. Slight misnomer in it that it's a health board allocation letter, so we're not directly allocated from that, as you know, but it gives us a good insight on what the level of additional funding we might get for next financial year is, because it's what our commissioners are funded through. And it does actually go on within the detail of the letter to say that the general uplift that has been applied to the health board allocations for next year is an increase of 1.77%. So to put that in context, that was 3.67% for this financial year. So it's significantly less than what the uplift had coming into this financial year. And the letter does describe a process by which it is expected that uplift then is passed through from health boards in their commissioning agreements with providers. So that includes us. So that's our working assumption clearly, and we're continuing discussions, as Rachel outlined, with JCC to ensure we get some confirmation of that in writing through the process. On top of that, the financial planning guidance is that the impact of whatever the pay deal for 25-26 ends up being, so what the pay award uplift will be fully funded by government, as it has been in the last couple of years. And I mentioned a little bit earlier, didn't I, about making sure that this year's flows in the way that it needs to, and that has been ordered by government, to be fair, over the last couple of years. And also the costs of the additional employers' national insurance uplift is also funded separately on top of that, which is why you might see or have heard or seen headline uplift values for the health budget in Wales being much greater than 1.77%, because it's got to cover all of that off as well. So money's been held back for that. Residual that's left is 1.77%, and that comes out. Now, for us, obviously, that's got to therefore cover a range of things. Clearly, it's got to cover almost the first call on it. It's the full year effect of stuff that we've put in this year on a part that's kicked in on a part year basis. And as we know, there's always a full year covered increase in cost of that into next year. We know there's a range of known at this stage unavoidable cost pressures, inflationary uplifts, anything on non-pay inflation. Interestingly, whilst directly for us, the additional employers' NI will be funded for our employees, clearly where we have third-party arrangements with other organisations, their costs will increase as a result of increasing employers' NI, and that'll come through to us as part of our non-pay pressures. So, it's interesting, some dynamics in terms of how that will flow through and the impact on us of that. We're clearly going to have unavoidable costs linked to some of the stuff that we've talked about today already around how we are responding continually and transforming our services and our service offer around ensuring improvements around quality, safety and patient experience. So there's going to be costs that will come through inevitably that we will have to also incur, which are not fully effects of what we've done this year, but will be additionality in year, but we'll have no choice about how and when, we might have a bit of a choice about when they kick in, but we won't have a choice about having them kick in at all. And then we have to demonstrate through the letter, again, is in the paper, at least as a minimum delivery of a 2% savings, which is about 6.5 million for us. Now, in reality, I'm always a little bit, so it doesn't really fall neatly with me about a prescribed saving. Surely your savings is what you need to balance. Whatever your pressure is, whatever your income is, whatever you got left as a gap is what you need to save to balance. So having a prescribed minimum is a bit strange in some ways, I think. But what I think it will mean, and we'll pick it up, as I say, a little bit more detail later, is currently our level of savings to balance is going to be greater than that minimum requirement. So we're going to have to work through how we do that. But that's all ongoing. We got another session on Monday around further work that's literally happened overnight and in the last couple of days and between now and Monday, and again quickly beyond Monday, in terms of quantifying some of those cost impacts and what they look like, and when they're going to kick in through next year. We got a couple of important touch points then. I have a meeting with Welsh Government Finance and NHS exec colleagues with some of my team, specifically focusing on our financial plan development for next year, next Tuesday. As Rachel mentioned, we've got conversations upcoming with the JCC, and there's a 14th of February accountable officer letter date within the process as well, whereby we write to government, basically say where we are currently, what is next year starting to look like, and are we headed for balance, or if we're not, why not, and some of the impacts of getting to balance and that type of stuff, which we'll be working through over the next week or 10 days as well.
Okay. Good, thanks very much. So, any questions to Rachel or anybody else? Yes, sorry.
I wanted to ask about 26.26, where you talk about the risk of the integrated commissioning and planning meetings being stood down, and which seems disappointing. So, notwithstanding, throughout the document, you talk about, how you link up with your peers, and I just wondered is that because we've got a new commissioning body? Is there anything you can say about that? Because it seems a bit of a concern. And then my last point is just really quite minor, but where you put the structure of the document, volunteers don't come under our people. So I think possibly it's because the volunteer element is talking about the volunteer service.
Yeah.
And I think there's a subtlety in that about how you look into that document around our volunteers, of course, are our people. So I think I would just think about that when you're structuring that document.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. Yeah,
It may be that you have a volunteer section in both parts. That makes sense.
Yeah, okay, that's helpful. So just on the paragraph 26, so you're quite right, it's a result of that changing commissioning arrangements. So they were stood down the previous meetings that we had between the JCC members or Old East members and health boards, and nothing has been stood up as an alternative. We understand that is something that they are considering as part of their overall governance processes. The conversations that Jason and I have had with Ross, who's our lead commissioner, is that they're thinking potentially about having regional meetings as opposed to specific health board meetings, which might actually be quite helpful. And the understanding then being that local discussions continue with health boards through their 6 goals infrastructure. So we are already plugged into health boards, not with commissioners, but with health boards directly through the 6 goals process. So that is to come. We've expressed a number of times that it's a gap in the discussions. So we're awaiting, trying to influence and then awaiting the discussions, and that will certainly be one of the conversation points at our exec to exec meeting, because the gap in, so if our performance meetings with them have been stood down this year, so we haven't had that opportunity to talk to them about a number of things, either at a national level or at a local level. But all of those are things which they're working through as a new organisation.
So from my perspective, it feels like, quite a risk, and we might get to a solution, but I just wonder how we keep this on our radar, or is it something that FMP are going to be looking at? Because certainly I'd welcome an update in this space.
Yes. I mean, we did talk, didn't we, about reviewing again, because there is a risk on the risk register around this, and about perhaps increasing the score and reviewing that again in the light of those risks that you're talking about.
100, isn't it? Risk 100.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jane, did you want to make
Yeah, just to quickly follow up, I think it's covered under the assurance element on the treble A. It was coincidentally something that we picked up and discussed in FPC around those meetings, and we were reassured that despite that, there's a plan going forward, but also there is still that existing network of meetings that go on a clinical, operational, strategic planning basis that are still very much embedded in the way we work. So I think something certainly, as you said, I think that we would want to keep an eye on, but reflecting that it's early days in JCC.
I guess the key point is if the exec, you feel there's a gap and that's impacting on our, planning and integration work, that's I guess when we need it to be flagged and come back to it. Thank you.
Okay, and Rhiannon, you want to?
Yeah, I was just interested to understand about our strategic approach to innovation, notwithstanding the financial constraints. And I don't mean the current innovations which are in train. It's more that kind of future thinking, and how in governance terms perhaps we're set up to ensure that we've always got that kind of mind to the future in that context of innovation.
Interesting topic we were talking about only yesterday, I think.
Yeah, I mean, so we're in the rounds of effectiveness reviews at the moment, and we had our second one, which was with the Academic Partnership Committee, which doesn't really do what it says on the tin. So we've known for a while that the name's not right, and it was established really to set up university trust status. And so this was a really good opportunity when we met a couple of weeks ago to say, where does this move to now? What's the future of it? And we really looked at what the health and care quality standards say. So there's a learning research improvement standard there. But there's also our strategic objective of being at the forefront of innovation and technology. And is this the place for that, particularly if we're going to be developing risk appetite statements where we might be at the hungrier end of the scale, and we need to have that oversight, I guess, of risk versus reward in that. So what we agreed is that we would spend a bit of time as an executive team to look at how we can feed that through, particularly around the innovation, because it does sit across a number of different portfolios, but that's the direction of travel, and whether we can bring other elements into that as well. So I think it was a good discussion that took us to a good place, because once we do have that BAF developed, each committee will need to own some of that. So actually, I think it fits in quite nice. Just need to work out some of the logistics and mechanics and of that coming through.
And the funding.
And the funding, yes.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Any other final questions or comments to Rachel? In relation to the first directorial papers, item 13, we were just noting, and I would just make the point to underline actually what I think somebody else was saying, that the amount of activity which is going on, and when you think of the pressures within this organisation, doing the day job is enough, but actually we're doing an awful lot more than the day job, as your report shows. And the fact that lots of those activities are in the green, there's a few in the ambers, but I mean, it's still remarkable that we are achieving this level of kind of transformation and change in the face of a very difficult day job. And then in terms of item 14, your second one, looking at the future of the IMTP, again, we're asked to note the progress. We've had the sort of health warnings on the financial issues, and we also note the cycles that we're engaged in. So I think that's fine. If everybody's content with that, we'll move on to item 15, which is the governance report. Trish, we've got to approve something and ratify something.
Yes, so ratification of a chair's action made in December for the affixing of the trust seal for Thanet House. And then the approval of the board and committee dates for next year, 25-26. There may still be a little bit of movement. We don't know the Welsh Government jet dates yet. We're hoping that they're not going to clash, but we can add them in. The AGM we think will be fixed, but that may still move depending on Welsh Government's instructions. Academic Partnership Committee, we're only going to be having 3 meetings next year because we're going to give way for the April meeting to give us a bit of time for some of those discussions. Corporate Trustee, we're going to have a meeting set for Corporate Trustee as we did today after each charity committee, particularly as we flow through the direction of travel for the strategy. And one thing which isn't on there is we've altered the date of the Remuneration Committee in August. We've moved that by a couple of days. But other than that, it's here for approval, please, Chair. It's done the rounds of a number of rounds of consultation and some movement, and thanks to Alex for that, because it's no mean feat trying to get all of those in the diary. The intention would be that we start a bit earlier next year and potentially do it for a bit longer.
Good. Okay. No, difficult task trying to align onto different people's diaries and external commitments, internal commitments, and so on. So thanks, Alex. It's not going to be, and there's always going to be. I've been there with around in some clashes there, but hey, we live with that. It's just the way life always is. Okay, so everybody content to ratify the use of that seal, and is everybody content to approve those dates? We are. Good. Okay. So we're coming towards closing items. Board and committee reports. We have a number of those. Remuneration Committee. I don't have anything specific to add to papers that were circulated, unless anybody's got any questions on Remuneration Committee activities. No. So then moving on to Finance and Performance Committee. Jane, anybody want to?
Yeah, I've drawn out, I think, most of the key points already in other items, but also just wanted to draw board's attention to the other item in the alert, which is on a much more positive sense. So it's important, I think, to include not just the challenging ones, and my thanks to Trish for making sure we did that. And that relates to the internal audit that was returned for the Trouble One digital operations. So to get substantial assurance with no recommendations is broadly unheard of. Yeah, I think I'll look to Peter, might have more on that, but really good work and excellent work from Johnny's team on that. So just wanted that recognised.
Great. Thanks, Jane. Peter?
I did scrutinise the internal auditor. Are you sure?
Sounds like a frightening prospect, doesn't it?
It was a complete clean bill of health. So just endorse things. Congratulations.
Good. Good. Well done, everybody, on that score. Okay. Any questions in terms of finance and performance? No. So then on to academic partnership, which Tricia you're going to deal with.
Estelle will take it.
Oh, Estelle. Okay.
Yes. Thanks, Chair. Just very briefly, Trish alluded to it there. We had a really robust discussion as part of the effectiveness review conversation about what manner of this committee needs to evolve into, having originally kind of been a vehicle for getting university trust status. So we've agreed with sort of committee's indulgence to have 3 meetings in 25-26, the first one of which is likely to be in July, in order that we can do some thinking as an executive team about what kind of activities will fall under the purview of that committee, so we can then test that as we move forward, because there's quite a lot now with our commercialisation agenda, innovation, etc., which we kind of need to think about how we home and where we home it.
Good. Okay, thank you very much. No questions? No, hands up. Okay. Consent items, we've got some board committee papers, which were their committee's minutes, which we've seen.
Chair, could I just come in?
Yeah,
just for the eagle-eyed amongst you, will notice that item 18 is a repeat of 17.2. So apologies for that. This is the shared services partnership committee meetings. We'll make sure that they're added to the next meeting. So apologies.
Which brings us to the end, I think. Any reflections on today's meeting anybody wishes to share before we close? Okay, I don't have any other business, so looking around. No, we don't. We've got a date of the next meeting, which is fine. So we will close this open session. We'll resolve to exclude external members and the press. We will reconvene after a lunch break. Give ourselves 45 minutes, so that will be 10 minutes to 1. We'll meet back here at 10 to 1 for our part 2.